All right, guys, we are on the clock. Got a four-person panel today. Something new, something different. Welcome to our first-time guest, Stephen Gillaspie from No Ceilings, the Draft Deeper Podcast Network. Pleasure to have you on, Steve.
Hey Julian, it's pleasure to get to finally link up and talk with you. We've been kind of going back and forth very recently. Caleb, same to you. Trevor, big shout out, man. Get to work with you for a second time. Got some run with you last year. Had so much fun. I'm glad to finally get to link up with all of y'all at once here today.
Yeah, we're happy to have you for sure.
Really happy to have you.
Hope it won't be the last. I've got some draft stuff. Hopefully, playing the next couple of months. Obviously, it's only going to get wilder from here. So I'll
see
you
dude.
soon.
Just
see you
say
soon.
All right,
Julian, get us kicked off, buddy.
Well, I figure where we start, and probably it's been one of the more interesting. I wouldn't just say interesting. I feel like that's a degrading way of putting it. It's been one of the more intense non-conference seasons that I've ever seen for a long time. We got teams all over the top 25 playing against each other, all kinds of weird mid-major upsets. So I think it's just as good of a time as ever to get into a little title discussion. Maybe talk about a couple of teams, Houston, that we think are looking like they're the favorites, and maybe get some dark horse talk going on. Anyone have a team they want to start with?
can I go ahead and jump in?
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
I like Kansas. I think Kansas is a really good team. I mean, Dwan Harris, you got the point. So listen, we're not talking basketball prospects and who we think is going to get drafted like in the first or whatever round. Like, to be a successful college basketball team, you have to have that like tone setting point guard. And it's not always, like I said, the flashiest prospect, but Dwan Harris, really efficient ball mover, not afraid to get paint touches, not afraid to set screens, not afraid to just be a pest on the defensive end and really just kind of set the tone and reorganize the offense whenever he needs to. Great option for Bill Self just to kind of reorganize the offense in the middle of a run on the opposite end. Then you got guys like, Grady Dick, Kevin McCullough, Jalen Wilson, KJ Adams. They got a good bench as well, I think, and they're obviously very well coached and had success last year, right? So I like Kansas a lot.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's who I was going to go with first.
I think they probably have the best wing depth in college basketball right now.
Yep.
It's hard pressed to beat. Yeah.
I can't think of a team with four wings that are as good as the combination of Rice, Adams, Dick, and Wilson. And we've talked about this. We've talked about this in the past, Trevor. The two things that probably take precedent more than anything in March are good guard play and coaching, and they have it.
Check.
Yeah,
you're gonna love my answer then. If you like guard play, good guard play is a keyword, and you also like coaching, you're gonna like mine. But go ahead and finish yours out, Julian. You said Houston at the beginning in a very sarcastic manner, which I assume is probably where you're going.
Didn't they just lose?
They did to Alabama.
They did just lose to Bama. They did just lose to Bama, and this was on a bad shooting night from Brandon Miller, so that was concerning. But I still believe, and look, no one's going to go undefeated in college basketball anymore. That just doesn't happen. There's no more Kentucky teams with Anthony Davis and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist and the Harrison twins going around.
Isn't UConn still undefeated?
They are.
They are, but
10-0. So is Purdue. So is Virginia.
11-0.
Yep.
They are scary.
UConn's 11-0.
Yep.
They're another team that's on my list, but for me, the thing with Houston is that they just have so many ways that they can beat you, and they are one of the best rebounding teams in the country. It doesn't matter. I've watched them play against Oregon. I've watched them play against, some of the drag in their schedule. They always seem to be dogging it on the boards, both offensively and defensively. And I'm pretty sure at one point they were rated on KenPom as the best defensive team in the country. And it would not surprise me. Kevin Sampson's teams are always tough defensively, but I think that this is the most talented roster that Kevin Sampson has ever had, at least from like a NBA prospect perspective.
Can you tell me why he hates Jarris Walker?
As someone who loves Jarris
I don't
Walker,
get it, dude.
I don't know.
I think that's a great point. Stephen. I'll let you finish it, but I'll point out something I noticed.
Well, I mean, I just think that when we watched him in high school, he was just like the Swiss Army knife on both ends of the ball. I think that the
Yep.
defense has been there for him this season a little bit. Like he's not being at they're not like a switch everything defense. You know, there's certain positions and certain times where he will make a switch, but it's not a switch everything defense. I think that they could, and I also think that they
They
could
really
stand.
could with their front court depth. Absolutely.
And then I'm also wondering why he is just kind of being put in the corner. You know, we've said on No Ceilings that he's getting like a Dylan Mitchell treatment. Granted, Dylan Mitchell, it makes sense, right? Like has trouble shooting. You don't really trust him to make more than a couple dribbles. The passing is essentially like the next guy over along the perimeter and not too far away, right? But Jarris, we saw him orchestrate. You know, getting him into some short roll action would make a heck of a lot of sense to me. Putting him in positions on some like what's the harm in a DHO action between he and Sasser? Like, shouldn't that be essentially unstoppable? Like, I don't understand why that's not being a thing.
I mentioned this to Julian one time. He has these moments where I'm like, we look at that as draft guys and go, okay, like he's having these games. Like, why is he not unlocked? Like, that's what we're here talking about, right? But then you have these Kelvin Sampson, sound bites after this was like the third game of the season. They played some crap team, but he was basically like, no. Like, I get what y'all are saying. He's like, but he had a Houston game. He had a 5 rebound, a 3 block, 2 deflections, and he's like going off and defending his guy. But I'm like, why aren't you playing him like that? So we're all around the same point. We all agree. And as somebody who has him really high, it's like, it sucks. I want to see like this unlocked potential, and it's not like the American is this like bloodbath, right? Like it's not like he's playing in the SEC. Like I'd love to see him play in the SEC. I think it'd be unbelievable. But like I can't. I hope they make the tournament and they play really good teams and they just bully ball the crap out of people with him. I'm really excited.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
So
I think I kind of wanted to poke in with the Calvin Sampson point that you made. I don't think it's necessarily that he doesn't like him, and I don't think that that's what you meant at
Yeah,
all.
a
But
little
I think
hyperbolic there.
Yeah. I
Part,
get you.
yeah.
I get you. But I absolutely agree. I think I've seen it in honestly a lot of the players on Houston's team, besides really Sasser or Mark, where their body language, just kind of you can tell that they're really reined in as a team. Like there's a lot of discipline. It's not a free for all, and I think that that's a big thing that Drace was able to kind of do at IMG was just kind of do whatever he wanted to. He was this superstar player, and I think it's clear that he's probably the third or fourth scoring option most times down. And I think they're kind of treating him like you kind of pointed out, like Dylan Mitchell. I think that they give him the same role that they give Terrence Arsenault, and it makes no sense. Like especially on offense, but. I think that was a great pick, Julian. I think that they're probably, I was watching some of their front court guys today, and there's the depth that they have of guys that can all do the same thing, kind of all cut out of the Gerace defensive cloth. It's fun to see. I mean, I agree. They really should switch everything because they can do it. They got the length to do it.
So I'll make my national title pick quite quick because we like good guards, we like good coaching. That's just obviously as draft people you want to talk about all these great prospects, but like national title, like you mentioned about Kansas, national title teams are completely different than a team full of freshmen. It's very rare. My heart and my mind want to tell me that it's Alabama or Houston. I think Alabama deserves the respect right now, obviously beating Houston straight up. So I think Alabama and Houston right now are ones that my mind wants to tell me those two. But I'm going to go with the pick that I started the year with, and Julian and Caleb are going to know why, and I'll just make it a really fast, easy elevator pitch. You're talking about good guards. When R.J. Davis and Caleb Love are playing really, really well and not taking stupid shots, and I'm going to very emphasize stupid shots, when they're putting up good shots and playing good offense together, they're two of the best guards in the country together. Good coaching, obviously, we've seen what Hubert Davis can do in a young career as a coach. And then just I want to point out the Citadel game only because of the fact that when they play like this, they scored 100 points against Citadel, and obviously they beat them by 40, right? I'm not discrediting Citadel, but no individual player scored more than 17 points, and Carolina assisted on 24 of 32, 75% field goals. If they're playing like that, they're going to beat anybody in March, and I have to stick with them for now until I see how ACC play might tear them apart. Obviously, Baycott's not fully healthy, so.
Well, they just got him back, so.
Yep, hopefully fully healthy is the key word. Fully healthy, I hope. Play him lightly for now.
I'm not a big fan of like the way that they've tried to ingratiate Pete Nance into the offense. Like obviously Brady Manick was a player that I was like low key, maybe you get this guy in like late second round just as a floor spacer, is like what we just saw with Matt Ryan in LA. Like I feel like Brady Manick probably could have did that, right? But putting Pete Nance in that spot, like Pete did well last year before he transferred over, kind of in a similar floor spacing type offense. But I don't know. I just feel like with Manick gone, Leaky Black really hasn't shown like another step and on the offensive
No
end at
Puff
all.
Johnson.
Puff,
No Puff
yeah,
Johnson or
same thing. So it's just I feel like RJ Davis has even kind of taken a step back this year from the games that I've
absolutely.
seen, and Caleb Love too a little bit. So it's just like your best players are taking a step back. Baycott's just an animal, like just a ferocious guy in the lane. But the people that you were relying heavily on, and I don't feel like you build up a lot of depth on this team either. I'm a little concerned about Carolina, but Trevor, to your point, they started rough last year too. Like Coach Davis just might be like a second half of the year type dude.
That was that was the last point I was going to make. Was they did the same thing last year?
They have two freshmen that I think should still, we should hold out on. Is Seth Trimble and Jalen Washington, I believe. I think both
Trimble
of them
looks
will
nice.
I think both of them will get incorporated into the rotation as they go through ACC play. And I think Trimble will be able to give good minutes. He's really good. He went to Menominee Falls, which is like 20 minutes from my high school. So I've gotten to see him play a couple of times in person. He's defensively, he's one of those guys that I'm liking. And Washington looked really good in the game against the Citadel. He was getting some confidence. So I don't mind the UNC pick. I think they still have a good chance, Trevor.
Can never count them out.
I'll get into mine. I got UConn. They're 11-0 right now, and I think it's easy to commit to recency bias. But I've mentioned it a couple of times on. I think I talked about it on 6 Month Madness this week. Little plug there. We have, UConn has, in my opinion, the best front court in college basketball with Sunogo and Klingon. I think that they are going to be able to protect the rim at a really, really high level. They have Andre Jackson, who's been a phenomenal player for them, and Tristan Newton has the highest plus minus in the entire country right now. So, right now it's hard to look at any other team than them when they're at 11-0, have a lot of really, really good wins. When you look at their schedule, you're like, I don't really remember playing them. Like, I feel like I would have heard more about that game, and it's because UConn put the hurt on somebody. I mean, I could go through it, but I don't really feel like I need to. I think we all like a lot of the players they have, but you just don't hear the buzz. And I think it's just because generally, recently at least, UConn hasn't been the most dominant program, and on the men's side at least. But I think they're starting to make their way back around. There's a lot of really talented players on that team.
I agree with you, and I think it's one thing to think about too. And we made the point earlier about how the way you construct a college basketball team can be different from other teams and how it relies on the championship runs. But regardless, I think preseason expectation tailors a lot of people's expectations in December. You look at them and you're like, oh, well, Gonzaga, like I'm not going to pick them as a national title favorite when they're literally, 17th in the last bowl? 15th. So it's like that seems really low for a team that we thought was a top 3 consistent all year, and they're still a really good chance to win the national title. So this early in the year, all of these picks are so good, and that's why I think UConn's a good one as well, just because preseason expectation wise, we have to tamper what we thought about a team before. You have to look at what they've done and not look at the team, like the label on the team, I guess is my point. Happens
and
a lot.
the fact that Klingon has stepped in to this rotation with the ability to get floor time, but also like the ability to go out there and make mistakes, and in the moments that he's out there, there's buzz around him being drafted this season now. Like legitimately,
he is massive, dude, and he can really move his feet on defense. Like I think that if he's able to put together a good stretch here in the second half, and it's hard to beat a team when they can put guys who are that big out on the floor and can move that well on defense and get to the basket. And then when they have, Newton and Jackson who can defend on the perimeter like they do. I mean, Newton is, in my opinion, is the most underrated defensive guard in the country. But
he's up there, yeah.
So I love that team. I've been watching them a lot over the last week. Just kind of nitpicking a lot of the things. I don't like Jackson as much as a lot of people do. I've heard some people. I I'm not there yet, but I'll get there. It's just one of those.
He has his
guys,
limitations.
I think
He has his limitations, like as a shooter and stuff. But I mean, as a long, lanky defender, rebounder, a guy that you can kind of run some like ancillary playmaking through, like it's a pretty good player to have for the college level.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
Well,
All right,
to
Julian, do you
segue us
want to
into
segue?
Yeah, to segue us into prospects, I would like to mention I can't believe we talked 5 minutes about UConn without mentioning my favorite player on UConn, Adama Sanogo.
I thought you were going to say Jordan Hawkins.
No, I'm not there on
Oh,
Jordan Hawkins yet. I'm a huge Sanogo guy. He is I
Okay.
think he is one of the smoothest rollers off of screens in the country. Whether he's rolling to the basket or whether he just slides out for the pick and pop. He is he's not one of my under the radar guys, but he could very easily be on my list. I think he's draftable. Speaking of guys who I think are draftable, how does a 7'5" center who averages 5 blocks a game sound? Anybody? Any takers?
4.8, right? I'm kidding.
It's
I'm
close
kidding.
to 5.
I'm kidding.
It's
round
close
up.
enough.
Round up for the
Talk,
fun. Round up
talk
for the
to
fun.
me when it's a clean 5.
Yeah, right.
I think Jamarion
obviously
Sharp
you're
is a
talking about
draftable player.
Jamarion Sharp.
I think Jamarion Sharp at Western Kentucky, who is 9-1 by the way, under the radar,
Yeah,
9-1.
They have a really good guard. What's his name?
Tough L last night though. That hurts.
Yeah.
Whew. To lose to one of the
going.
worst starts in college basketball, it's tough. But anyway,
I have not been up to date on them. Who'd they lose to last night?
Louisville.
Yeah,
No way.
Yeah.
one of the worst teams to start this season
Ever.
Yeah.
All right.
It's bad.
I
What I said.
I don't like to be negative, Julian, but I'll be the first one to kind of dig into here a touch.
To be negative.
I like Sharp to be negative. I think he's way more mobile than Edie or Fall, which I think are the two guys that we've seen like most recently that are, that type of size. I'm sure he's got a plus wingspan, which is probably incredible at 7'6". I don't think that Fall or Edie are have quite the length that he does. And I think also, like I said, he moves his feet well. So I think he could hypothetically play pick and roll defense in the NBA. The thing that I just don't think he's that strong. I don't think he has a very strong base. I've seen countless, mid-major like 6'9" post scorers just absolutely move him completely under the hoop and take him out of the play defensively. And, I think that's something where I probably am more inclined to take a guy like Edie over him because I can trust Edie to hit a post hook. Jamarion can really only dunk the ball. And granted, again, he moves his feet much better than Edie does. And, he can kind of, sneak up on teams with his athleticism. I think it's pretty underrated for a guy who's 7'5". I think he can get up a little bit, but I'm concerned about the strength. And then on top of that, I just already think he'd be a guy that would be a second round pick. So you would send him in there to hopefully guard a guy like an Embiid or guard a guy who, is a major threat at attacking the basket. And you also need to get, a good contest on a taller player in the mid range. And I just don't think he's going to be able to guard anybody, one-on-one, in my opinion. I don't know. That's my take.
I think that just in general, the idea of bigs needing to be great post defenders is kind of a lost art unless you're guarding Embiid or Jokic. And I think it's pretty dumb to be like, yeah, I'm not going to draft this guy because he cannot guard two of the best one-on-one players in the NBA. And I do understand your issue. The offensive stuff is bad. Don't get me wrong. He's
a zero.
Yeah, he doesn't contribute anything offensively. But I think in the modern NBA, pick and roll defense is so essential. If with that kind of length and that kind of mobility, I think he's worth at least taking a shot.
Yeah, so I don't look at him as a draftable guy, Julian. And
Really?
I hate to break it to you, or at least share my opinion in that manner, because look, essentially he's going to be a drop big, right? Which really limits the amount of teams that are going to want to draft him. If he can only play in drop coverage, there's only so many teams that run that scheme, right? He's not going to be able to really step out, even like defensively from the film that I've watched, to include the Louisville game. He's pretty good about guarding a guy in front of him, and obviously has tremendous length. And when a guy has him like in that mid range game, like he can kind of bait them into thinking that they got a enough room to get a shot up. But he's not always going up against like NBA level speed and athleticism, right? When the action's happening away from him, he has a tendency to get back cut. I don't like his hands on offense. I'm not a real big fan of his footwork on offense either. So if I'm just like steadily chipping away at the things that I think that are vital for an NBA guy, you kind of have him in that Taco Fall category where he's almost like a specialty novelty player, right? Like where he can come in for spurts here or there. The regular season is long. Having him in your rotation gives you opportunity to send guys back and forth to the G League, probably to include even himself, and give guys spells. But I don't feel like if I'm drafting and I only have limited number of resources that I would need to expend to any of those to get him. I don't think that I don't think that he's going to have enough. I don't think he's going to have enough teams like really wanting to get him to necessitate having to draft him. I think that he could get a shot on like an Exhibit 10 or a two-way deal or something like that, and a team to bring him in and say, hey, let's see what you can bring to us. And the shot blocking is a really good skill. Like he's elite at, if you're elite at anything in the college level, like teams are going to give you a look, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to draft you. So like that's kind of where I am on him as a prospect.
That's valid. I think that the bar nowadays for a center in the NBA is a lot higher. And I'm mostly a lot of this is based on that there's been similar guys in his position with that size and that length that have been drafted, and like Boban Marjanovic just carved out a 10-year NBA career, right?
Yeah.
And Boban is not the most gifted offensive guy. He's long, he moves his feet well, he's a good drop big.
He has great touch around the basket, though. Like
he's sure a hell of a lot better than Jamarion.
Tremendous touch around the basket.
Significantly better. I liked Edey, comparing Edey to Boban. I think that's a fair comparison for Sharp and Bobby. I don't think he's quite like that.
And Bobby comes from like that European school of thought too, where like you have to be able to pass, and then I think Jameer, Sharp as a passer leaves a little bit to be desired as well.
He struggles to even find spots in the dunker spot sometimes. Like he kind of finds himself trying to post people up and then remembers, oh wait, I actually don't want the ball, because if I get the ball, I don't know what to do with it. So then he kind of turns around and just kind of stands a foot off the block, and he'll happen to get a lob or two at that spot, but I don't know. I don't think in a league where it's moving towards having every player on the floor as close to 6'10" as possible, and having all of them be able to switch and guard every single position, I don't think a 7'5" guy, it just really fits beyond what Stephen said, is a guy who can fill a spot on the roster, come in, get stretch minutes. But I think he's still probably draftable, just very, very late in the second round.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was going with that. All right, who wants to throw a probably more draftable prospect into the mix?
let's give Stephen a go. Let's give Stephen a go. Let the guest get at it.
All right, so these are not the sleepers, right? Like these are
underrated. Who do you value as underrated? Yeah.
Okay, cool. Keyshawn Gilbert, UNLV.
It's a good one.
Like keep the name close to your chest. Like telling you now, this guy is rising already. I'm not the only one at No Ceilings that likes him. I'll leave it at that. Just the way that he plays, man. Like you're talking about a 6'4", almost 200-pound sophomore, so he's not a dinosaur. He's a sophomore guard. Still can't buy alcohol yet, I don't believe. So like that's a good thing for all the people that like the developmental curve, right? 6'4", almost 200 pounds. Plays both sides of the ball very well. Am I allowed to? I'll keep it clean. So the way that I
like to keep it clean here.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Less work in post-production too. Thank you.
I totally understand. I get it. So I'm not a big swear either. I was just going to drop a P word and not the enemy one, right? So the way that I like to describe Keyshawn Gilbert when I watch him play is that when he's playing basketball, it's like he's just like walking in the park. And when the defense gives him an opening, like it legitimately offends him. Like it drives him nuts. Whenever he is out there doing his thing and the defense gives him anything, it infuriates him. And he just all of a sudden flips the switch and plays very angrily, but also under control. Like he's a very good 3-point shooter. Last time I checked, I think he's around 50% from deep. So there you go. He's pretty good around the basket. He's one of these like long, wiry, athletic guards that are very trendy in the NBA. And again, defensively plays very well. I think he's around 2 steals a game right now. So yeah, just a guard that I think that in a bevy of guards that exist in college basketball, even among the ones that have a good shot to get drafted. Keyshawn Gilbert, I've featured him a little bit in a couple of my written work. You're starting to hear the name more and more now. So I want to go ahead and put this out there that while he still is underrated, keep your eye out for Keyshawn Gilbert out of UNLV because he's a prospect.
Yeah. They're undefeated as well. I mean, it's going to be hard to keep them out of the national spotlight for long. I think there's a great time of year to be talking Keyshawn Gilbert for sure. I like the way you describe his game. I think that you couldn't have said it any better. I don't think there's a better way. He genuinely, I see it though. I see what you're talking about where he's just like, why are you leaving me open right now? Like, I got that. That's mine.
Like, how dare you? You know, like, who do you think you are?
Swagger to him. He's got a lot of swagger to him. I love it. He's a really fun player to watch. That was a great one. Trevor, you want to go next, or I can go? Or wait, is there anybody who disagrees with Keyshawn Gilbert?
I thought he was going to say Keyshawn Hall, but that's okay. Either one, right? Either Keyshawn on UNLV doesn't.
Not Keyshawn Johnson.
I'm intrigued by mine only because y'all are all reaching really far down to the bottom of the barrel and going, this guy, right? And I think someone is sneaking in our first round, maybe for some of y'all, probably early second. I think he's sneaking underrated right now, and I think it's warranted. Julian and I have had this conversation recently, as in like last night, and I want to put this out there to the world because I think Dariq Whitehead has become underrated, and I think obviously it's December. He's dealt with an injury.
That's totally fair.
And I think it's worth warranting, and I normally don't lead with questions, but I'm going to lead with a question that will help kickstart this conversation because I think it's less important about like why I think he has NBA quickness and all this stuff, like all these stupid draft notes I have, right? I think it's more important of what questions can we find out, especially this early in the season, about a guy that could unlock a potential for him. So the way I thought through this was, and I want to know you guys' opinion, whether it's how or how not, but knowing exactly what we know now in mid-December, would he benefit from doing another year at Duke?
I think he would.
I don't think that it would hurt him by going, but I also think that based on what we know now, like I still have him top 10. Like
so do I.
I think that even the people that are concerned from what they've seen so far still have him like top 20. I'll say just to kind of be conservative. Like a lot of people that I have seen that, you know, publish boards still have him like in that top 20 range. And it's funny that Duke just like consistently has these wing prospects that come in with injury concern and have to play their way into the season. And we almost forget that like leg injuries, usually you don't see 100% of a prospect until 2 years after sustaining a leg injury, right? So like the fact that he's out here doing anything at all, like within the year that he's playing, and you have to look at that. Like to me, like as an evaluator, here's what I do. If I see anything negative right now and it has to do with feel, that's where I get concerned. I don't get that inclination from Dariq Whitehead at all. Like the negative things that I see right now aren't feel related, but it's physically. And if you understand that like he hasn't been able to do anything on 2 feet for a really long time, that makes a lot of sense. But if you look at the feel aspect of his game, I think that it's still there. And I think that he's still going to be a very talented guy. Trevor, I love the way that you sold that too, because it's like, this isn't a no-name dude, but he's still kind of getting and I think Keontae George almost in a similar manner where like he's not injured, but people are kind of taking his I think that they're not taking his situation into account when they're like, he's starting to precipitously drop down boards now.
I like the thought process. I love how you wink to AJ Griffin. I'll just say it out loud because that's basically what you just did. And that's fair. But all that stuff aside, right? Like I'll do some deep dive on him later, but like it's the point about how even in that top 10, and I'm glad at least for you and I agreed on this. I know relatively where Caleb and Julian have him. But understanding that like there are limitations to him in that top 10 range. Like there are guys that are similar. There's a lot of Dariq Whitehead type athletes this year, right? Like we all understand that. And obviously his bag isn't deep when it comes to certain things, and that's where I'm kind of like, okay, he's underrated in the sense that I agree with you. There are some people that have dropped him very, very far, and some of that's warranted, which is why I don't necessarily hate where he is right now for a lot of people. I'm fine with him being underrated because when he goes crazy in the ACC play, I think we'll see that reverse just happen right around quickly. So I don't think it's a long conversation, but I think it's a good one.
I'll out myself. I know most people don't want to do this, but I'll out myself. I dropped him. And I didn't
want to do it to you two because obviously I'm going to finish up my first round here soon, and we're going to create that composite for the first round. I didn't want to do that to you two and just be like, "Hey, this is where Caleb and Julian have him," but you're not the only ones, and I knew that you probably did.
I have him in that lower range of my board. I don't think that he's necessarily as bad of a prospect as where I have him. I just think that there's a lot of guys right now that I'm seeing things from that are showing tremendous positives about their game and about their athleticism, and just they have contributed to rising up their stock, and he just hasn't done anything that's contributed to him rising. So I don't see it as him. Like, I think a lot of people talk about the board talk and draft Twitter. It's so weird and convoluted, but like, I don't think necessarily somebody falling on your board should signify that, you don't like their game, you don't like him as a player. Because, there's a player that's fairly similar body type and did a lot of very similar things last year's draft that I loved, who's very clearly similar to Dariq Whitehead and Ben Mathurin. Like, I mean, the physical tools, some of the defensive stuff, the jumper. I don't know. I kind of like it. I just don't think that they're the same tier of athlete. But that's where I look at Dariq Whitehead and say, like, kind of what you touched on. I just want to let kind of things play out, the injury. But I think it's fair to say that he hasn't had the most phenomenal start compared to a lot of his freshman class, colleagues or whatever you want to call it. And he talked about Keontae George. I think Keontae's had a great season. I don't know why I've seen a lot of like disregard for him. I think he's shown a lot more in terms of being a playmaker than a lot of us even expected. And I mean, the defense for both those guys is very, very, very heavily underrated. So two guys I loved that Dariq Whitehead though. That's a great one, Trevor.
That's a great
nice job.
I would like to say, like, the big thing that Dariq Whitehead has been doing is the buy-in's been there, right? Even though the shots aren't falling, even though he's not getting to the spots that he was getting to necessarily when he was in high school, like, he's not dogging it on the defensive end. He is out there playing his ass off. People don't remember, he locked up Keontae George pretty bad in that first half in the high school game in the Gutgo Nationals. And a big reason why Keontae George struggled in that first half was because he couldn't get past Dariq Whitehead. I think that it's going to be one of those things where he's going to move back up people's boards eventually, and I am someone who moved him down on my board. I am because I think for me the issue is I understand where Stephen's coming from with the feel thing, but for me it feels like his game has not quite adapted to college yet, and that's a bit of a concern for me, but I think that that's probably more injury related than anything else. So I love that you brought him up because I think it's an interesting conversation to have because he's a guy who I think at this point is one of the more polarizing prospects in the first round of the draft right now.
Full transparency, when people are starting to do composites in that March, April range where a lot of people will start pushing them out, and he's like
absolutely
top 10 in those consistently, this is going to sound like a dumb conversation, but in the context of December,
I think it's very
15th,
valid for
it's
the context.
Valid. Julian, who is yours?
I think more off.
Go ahead.
He already gave his. It's me.
I mean, Caleb, but yeah, I'm looking at one of you and said the other name.
I love my kids all the time.
I kind of have somebody in a similar vein, but not quite. I think that he's a player that often gets talked about as a great college basketball player, but not necessarily as a great draft prospect this year. And that's Trace Jackson Davis.
You're talking my language now, Caleb.
TJD is a guy for me that when I just watch him play the game, he plays it the absolute right way, plays it at full force. and is a relentless basketball player. When I look for a guy, especially kind of looking around the landscape of the league at the forward and the 5 spot, you want a guy who's kind of in that 6'11", almost 7-foot range, who can really move his feet well, can switch on to guys in the perimeter momentarily, and then can do all the things on offense that you need for the modern NBA. Be able to set multiple screens on a possession, be able to move around, be able to space the floor a little bit from the short corner. Like we talked about Jarace Walker. Trace Jackson Davis can get the ball in the short roll and, throw up a little hook shot. He has decent touch around the basket, doesn't struggle with the free throw shooting. A lot of these things. And then he had a triple double. Who knew that the guy could pass that well and find the open man? I just think he plays the game the absolute the right way. He should be, at least in my opinion, I think that he'll probably be, top 3 in the player of the year conversation at the end of it. I think Indiana's that good. But in terms of a draft prospect, I think it's hard to deny a guy who can, do all the little things. And then, a plus athlete at the same time, and shows room for growth. I don't think that the mid-range jump shot is a lost cause. I think that he'll be able to hit stuff, when he gets the ball, if it's a little pick and pop here and there.
Caleb,
great player.
I'm going to give you something really fun.
It, boys.
No, I'm going to give you something really fun because I think we're going to hopefully have this out. We're recording this on Thursday the 15th. Hopefully this goes out sometime tomorrow, right? Because on Saturday the 17th, they go to Kansas. So obviously we're going to get to see a really intriguing, and I'm just bringing that up for the sake of, I don't disagree with anything you said. I love you and I are in the same vein with him. I think he is underrated. I love him a lot, and I'm fine with just moving on and someone else talking about him. But I think that Kansas game needs to be highlighted because I don't think he played bad against Arizona the other day, but I think Kansas is going to be the best test he's had so far. Obviously he's played Baycott and other guys, but this Kansas team's going to be able to, we're going to see if they can pick him apart. So Stephen, I'm excited to hear what you have to say because I know what Julian thinks about him instead of obviously Caleb. So
I have him as a late first-round pick. I love Trace Jackson Davis, and
let's go, Stephen.
Something that I think, and our buddy Corey spoke on this too, is that especially in the conference that he plays in, right? Like they run very archaic offenses, where it's feed your post player, let him cook. And if he can't cook, give him another shot. Maybe he'll hit it this time, right? So he is very much stuck in a role to where he has to camp on the block. Like that is their offense, is give the ball to Trace Jackson Davis on the block and let him cook. I understand why people want to see a 3-point shot from him, but he is not ever put into position where he can even attempt one. Our buddy Tyler Rucker just went and watched Indiana play recently, like live, and again, plug anybody who can watch a prospect live. I highly encourage it. Like you learn a lot, especially in warm-up sessions, because Tyler's posting clips that he's like on the 3-point line, like just canning threes. And he posted
can shoot
on Twitter.
like
he has touch, right? Like, and that's the thing too, is like even if you're not seeing a guy shoot 3-point shots, you look for touch indicators. You're looking at free throws. You're looking at runners. You're looking at finishing around the rim. Putbacks. You're looking for
being
all
able
these...
to just tap it in. Yeah.
Exactly. Second, and then you look at where he's put on the floor at Indiana, and then you say, well, what would an NBA team look like if they put him on the elbow and they ran DHOs off of him, or if they did any sort of action where he's setting a screen away from the ball and then giving the option to do back cuts and things like that. There's so much that he can do, I think that he shows it physically that he can do more. It's just that Indiana loves to camp him on the block because he's so good at it, it's successful. He's just never really put in positions to do anything else.
He's so strong.
Yes.
He's so strong. His positioning is unreal because he just moves people, bro. He's got such strength, and it really surprises you. He looks pretty slim, like in relative to how you'd expect a big man to look, a pretty buff, like big guy, and his arms are pretty slim, but he has probably got really, really low body fat percentage. That is one strong dude.
That was why I like the Baycott matchup so much.
I really like that you actually, Stephen. I really like that you mentioned some of the options in the NBA because I think his passing for what he's asked to do is phenomenal.
Right.
Talk to me,
He makes so many good swing passes. He passes out doubles well. He is not a high turnover guy. He sees cutters. Like all the things that you want your forward to do. And we're in an age where the power forward position is kind of coming back a little bit if you can shoot. You look around the league, you see guys like Evan Mobley, Karl Anthony Towns, whatever the hell is going on in Orlando right now. There's
so Julian
gets a 4 or 5 game win streak if they win tomorrow. So that's what's going on in Orlando. They're playing winning basketball all of a sudden.
So Julian gets to cuss
I'm the
twice,
NBA guy here.
Tell
Sorry,
me I don't get to say. Okay, I'm just. Okay.
No, you're good.
No. Julian doesn't follow the program.
Look, it's a passionate subject.
He just does whatever he wants.
The power forward subject is passionate. I can't wait to talk about it in more length in the future. I think we need to plan something and go, this is what we're talking about, the three of us especially, and just be like,
we'll definitely do a best prospects by position group. We'll do a little series of that.
He needs his recognition for sure.
The general point I'm trying to make here is Chase Jackson Davis is probably one of the best power forwards in the country, and that warrants a first round pick in my book. I think I'm starting to move. He was in the early 30s for me, but I am perfectly happy to move him in my first round. I think that he is an NBA player.
21, baby.
You watch him play,
21.
he looks like an NBA player. I think that kind of gets lost on people a lot. And they overthink it, and they go on to all the niches. Like if you're a talent evaluator, if you watch a guy play and he looks like an NBA player, he's probably an NBA player. It sounds simple, but so many scouts miss that.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's really simple, and we overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Julian.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, for the sake of time, I'm keeping an eye on the time for everybody. For the sake of time, do we want to relatively rapid fire the second? We all had 2 of them, and then we want to make sure we get those deep cuts at the very end. Each of us have. I'm a pretty passionate guy. We're feeling.
Are we all good on time tonight? Are we all chilling?
Yeah.
Y'all got me as long as you need.
No one's kicking me out of this room, so I think I might honestly be good for my bit.
For the sake of something happens, you go with your second prospect. Your second underrated guy.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Second underrated prospect. Yep. All right. Well, Taylor Hendricks has all of a sudden become like the worst kept secret in college basketball.
Could not have said it better. Literally today, KOC and JCOM Man did their pod, and that's what they talked about for 15 minutes. So yes,
that was after they discussed the NBA Top 100 on a college basketball show.
Him and DeShondre Washington went from really quickly went from sleeper guys to mainstream guys.
Quickly.
DeShondre Washington is in my second round conversation right now. Big fan of DeShondre. But sleepers, I'm gonna say Javian McCollum out of Siena. Another guard, another wiry guard, a very slithery, even though he's a little undersized, can get to his spots really well, very smooth, a mature, educated game. A lot of pro comparisons that you can put on him, and it's not just because his last name is McCollum. But yeah, he fits the mold of a very high scoring point guard. Now defensively, because of his physical limitations, gives you a little bit of concern. We had this conversation on No Ceilings about how important is point of attack defense, and consensus, we all agree that point of attack defense is important, right? It helps your team a lot, but we have seen NBA systems where they kind of have a revolving door at the point guard, Trae Young in Atlanta, to where as long as you can build a defensive scheme around him, you can account for it, and he makes up for it on the other end. And that's what I think McCollum can do. A very sound passer as well. He has this old man game that I always refer to, where it's just everything is kind of happening around him and he sees it in slow motion, and he has the perfect counters for them as well. And when you have that mature approach, it really captures my attention, and it really vaults you up higher than initially where I would have you. And I think that he does have athleticism. It's just not as poppy or flashy as some of the other guards prospect, but high fill guys typically rub me the right way. So I'm going to have Javian McCollum as my other underrated prospect.
I like Funny story about this one here. The first time I got put on Javian McCollum was I was watching Siena versus Ole Miss. And I was hunting. I happened to be sitting in my tree stand. I thought I'd pass the time in the middle of the day while, the deer action is supposed to be limited by watching some college basketball. And I was able to get a buck, not,
Multitasking.
30 minutes after. I was able to actually shoot a deer, not, 20 minutes after shutting off the Ole Miss and Siena game after it was over. And one of the things that I had noticed while I was watching the game, I liked Matt Morrell. I thought he was all right. But this guy McCollum is all over the place, makes it happen around it. Like you described, he kind of puts himself in the center of everything that's going on in the court and kind of just wreaks havoc. Kind of plays with his foot, like the pedal all the way down, which I like. I think that, it doesn't mean that he's, like you kind of hinted to, he doesn't play too fast, but he plays fast enough because the game is slow for him. He understands what's going on. He understands those reads, and it's something that, great athletes have to adapt to all the time. And I think some of the smaller guards have a little bit better time at it just because they've always had the ball in their hands. But a great player. I haven't watched a ton on him. That's kind of like one of my only real experiences I had with him. But I was super impressed in that one game I saw him. And, you're going to make me put him on my list to watch after this pod tonight.
Do your homework and let me know what you think.
Yeah, I have him in that same boat where he's on the list, right? The list is long, but he's on the list. And from what I have seen, I use the word silky very calmly, and I don't use it a lot. And I do think he fits that silky mold where teams fall in love with that sometimes. They're like, that guy can be, and obviously you mentioned the Trae Young example. So I pulled his Siena profile. I love the college basketball profiles because if the teams actually keep up with these, they're really interesting. Have you ever read his Siena college basketball profile on their website?
I have not.
Okay, so then you'll love this.
Unfortunately, not big into the biographical stuff.
Yeah, but anyway. Like if you're looking up somebody, like I had to do it a lot for a North Carolina piece I did a while back, but I pulled up I was looking up his stats, to be honest with you. I accidentally clicked on roster, so I just went and looked at the bottom, and his favorite team is the Atlanta Hawks, and the athlete he likes to model himself after is Trae Young.
Bingo.
So
there it is.
if that's not a confirmation of your scouting, then at least in this example, take your win. No, take your win and be happy. Like he values himself the same way. Like he thinks that he's that type of player. So I think that's really fascinating. I have nothing else on him. I've only seen him a handful of times. So that's just I wanted to make sure. Hang it up. All right, who wants to go next? Julian?
Caleb, you want to take this one? Me? All right.
Go ahead, man.
Well, I'm still on the fence about this guy, but I just see so many flashes that I'm intrigued. And my guy's Grant Sherfield.
Oh man, I love Grant.
It's just the off the dribble stuff. He's a really good passer. He's far and away the best player on that Oklahoma team and is a big part of their success.
Shout out Otega Oweh. Gone but not forgotten. Buried on that bench.
He has forced Otega Oweh into irrelevance, invisibility, whatever you want to call it. But he's just a player that every time I watch him play, and I was watching him play the most against Villanova, he just seems to always know what he's doing with the ball. He's playing under control. His jump shot is legit. I think he's got 3-level scoring potential. So that's a name that I just wanted to throw out into the ring and see what everyone else has to say about him.
Yeah, Steven, you said you love him. Go ahead. You said you love him, so go ahead.
I'm gonna be negative, so somebody go first.
Okay, I'll sprinkle some sugar on this real quick. So I'll preface it like this: I can love a prospect and not have a draftable grade on him, right? So like when I say I love him, it's because I have a deep board and I can tell you a prospect that I have ranked 151 that I'm just like that I still find things that I like, and that's kind of my approach. Is I'm more glass half full, and I have a higher standard for like the more higher ranked prospects than I do guys like in the middle of my board, right? So last I looked, I think I have him like in my top 120. And again, what makes it so hard to break through as a guard is because can I find another 6'2", 180-pound guy that does the exact same thing, but maybe a little bit faster, maybe a little bit more efficient, maybe a better playmaking chops, maybe better defender? Like, it's really hard to break in as a guard. And I think Grant will get looks somewhere. It may not be the NBA at first, but he will get looks somewhere because he has such a mature approach to the game. He's an orchestrator by heart. And being a Razorback fan, seeing him up close. And then, I tuned into the Villanova game because I was really looking forward to watching my number 3 overall prospect, Cam Whitmore, go to work. And Grant Sherfield really just stood out to me, man. So I'm really big on him. I love his feel for the game. I love his he's a good shooter too. He's got some good kind of finishing around the rim moves as well. It's just that he's not really he doesn't stand out amongst his peers because there's so many guys that can kind of do the same thing, but I still love him.
He's comfortably confident is the word I like to use for guys like him. He's comfortably confident. He's not Jaden Hardy, put my head down and shoot 25% for the first half of the season last year. It's that comfortable confidence where he's got guys around him that he trusts and he relies on them heavily. Caleb, I'd love to hear the salt to the sugar here.
So I love hearing the Cam Whitmore 3 thing. That's music to my ears as somebody who had him ranked above Scoot for a period of time. I love to hear it. I think Julian's the only one here who doesn't have him at 3.
Dun.
He's allowed to be wrong. I mean, it's okay. Hey guys, believe it or not, like I'm in the minority at No Ceilings that have him number 3. So
well, we all do, other than Julian, and he doesn't have him much farther.
Believe me, I know. I listen to you guys enough. I'm aware of where everybody's at on him. It's definitely made it hard throughout the beginning of the season to kind of stay put, but I will stay put on that one.
It's a tough range to nail down a number 3 this year.
Correct.
Yeah, it is. I mean, especially with the Thompsons. I mean, just it's hard not to convince yourself that, if one of these guys just so happens to be. But this is a sleeper prospect. We're not talking about these guys.
Right.
So the thing with Grant Sherfield is I agree. I think he's a great player, like a really, really, really good college point guard. The thing like Stephen kind of noted, I think that me and you have quite similar philosophies on the way that we kind of scout different tiers of our board, Stephen. He's one of those guys where I think, again, you touched on it perfectly. At 6'2", 200 pounds, also a senior, 23 years of age. I just think that there's a lot of options up higher on the board, even if the guy's not as good of a player right now. But I think I can get somebody who's, 6'3", 6'4", who maybe is a year or two younger, who has that little bit more upside. And then, I'd hate to be a person who nitpicks or tries to project something to happen.
But you're an analyst and that's a part of your job. So
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the around the rim finishing is pretty average. I don't think it's anything that he has as a strength. I think that he, could embrace contact a bit more, but again, he's 6'2", 200 pounds. There's not really much that you can do about it sometimes. He's solid there. The thing that I think right now that looks exceptional, that is probably due for regression, is the shooting. And I think, he's never been higher than a 36% shooter in his career at Oklahoma so far, and he's shooting 55% right now. One thing very notable is he's only shooting 25% on unguarded jumpers per synergy. He's actually in the 99th percentile right now for guarded jumper shooting off the catch and shoot. And then he's also, only 70th percentile off the dribble. So the biggest thing that, how I kind of interpret that as a scout is I think that, he's just having a really hot start to the season shooting the ball. It kind of concerns me that he's struggling when he's wide open, because those are the shots that I'd hope that he makes almost every time. And you honestly, from your good shooters, you see around a 50% clip on the unguarded catch and shoot, and you see probably a 35 to 40% clip on the guarded. And his is completely opposite. He's shooting 55% and 25%. So that's my advanced analytics BS on Grant Sherfield, but I think it's very valid when you have a guy who could kind of trick you with the eye test and some of the numbers so far. But he's a great player. Just not in my draftable range.
All right, who hasn't gone other than me for the second one?
Me, but okay. I might change mine up honestly. So if you want to go first, feel free.
Stephen, I'm going to preface this first. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that we're digging up old dirt with this one, because we had a conversation about this fellow's brother, and I have to thank you and I have to thank Rucker for this, because obviously last year I had this guy's brother a lot farther down the board for most of the cycle until probably mid-April. So that's my preface. I want to be clear, this guy has a brother, and we've talked about his brother before. I think you know where we're going with this.
I think I know where you're going.
First of all, thank you for keeping me honest about Keegan Murray. That's where I'm going with that. So I pulled up some stats, and some of it's eye-opening, and I'm just going to be really quick because I do want to sit here and wonder. Because I had a question for Derek. I also have a question for Chris. Why is Chris not being higher rated? And what can he do to increase his stock? Before we answer that, though, Keegan's stats last year, he had 23.5, 8.7 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.3 steals, and 1.8 blocks. Fully transparent, he was a better defender than Chris. That's just, I think we all know that.
Different position.
Slightly
different position.
Better athlete, too.
Correct. 55, 39, 74 splits. Those are important. And 29% usage. We're rounding a little bit down there. 29.7. Sure. 19.5 points per game for Chris. 10 rebounds. 2 assists. Same range there. 0.4 steals. 0.9 blocks. 58, 37, and 80 splits. Consistently better shooter than his brother. Obviously, 8 games versus 35 game sample size. I'm totally transparent about that. But with being such a 26%
and a
usage,
lefty.
And a lefty, which I think is important, 26% usage rate. What I'm getting at is why are we seeing a similar offensive production? Obviously, step back defensively from a guy who has a brother who's a top 5 pick, who's playing really well for the Light the Beam Kings. There they are. But
I love that.
Why are they not why are we not valuing him? A lot of people are valuing him in that 30 range, and I think that's fair. But I also think, come said and done in April, May, June, this guy deserves to be talked about in the end of the first round, a little bit higher than 30. So where are we?
I want to let you know you're asking at least one of us in this panel who has Chris Murray ranked 14th on his board.
Oh, wow.
Wait, hold on.
Like it.
Okay, all right.
I like it.
So then, okay, go ahead. I'm intrigued.
I value everything that you have said. Didn't he had a 30-20 game this year, if I'm not mistaken?
He did.
Really?
That's stupid. Why would you do that? Why would you get a 30-20 game? It's just ridiculous, man. He was a draft. There are several people in the draft Twitter community whom I respect. Chuck from Chucking Darts being one of them, and he had a draftable grade on this dude last year, and he has a crystal ball because everything that he was talking about, what he was doing last year and what he could do in a more expansive role has come to fruition this year on this team. And if you think about how talented this Iowa team was, to have had Luka Garza, both of these brothers, man, it's crazy that they have just had an heir apparent year over year. And I like Chris a lot. Now, you have to consider that an NBA team that's going to draft him isn't going to hand the keys over to him like Iowa is right here. So you got a reliable 3-point shooter. You got a reliable perimeter defender. You got someone who's smart enough to make the right reads, that if a defense sells out on him on the 3-point line, that he can make a couple dribbles and either attack an opening, he can float, or he can hit an open teammate, right? So if you're looking for a connector and a wing player who can do when he competes on the glass, right? He does literally everything. At the tail end of a lottery, you can do significantly worse than that, right? And let's be honest, most of these lottery and above dudes right now are freshmen. It's not gonna I'm telling you, it's not gonna shake out that way. Historically speaking, it never does. It's not gonna shake out that way.
We got Jalen Williams last year as a good example.
Yep. We got Max Lewis is creeping up boards right now all of a sudden too.
How about Jalen Wilson? I mean, Arthur Kaluma, all guys that are.
Jalen Wilson is another first round pick for me right now.
Same.
Yes.
I have him about the same spot. You have Chris Murray. I think we probably have him flip flopped. I have Murray in the later 20s and Wilson towards the lottery.
I have Jalen at 29.
Still first round.
So flip flop essentially.
Still first round, but I like Chris Murray a lot because he is showing you, and think about it like this, right? When we get to a certain level of NBA player, you have your stars, you have your superstars, then you have everyone else. Shout out to Draymond Green. The best, the players that succeed the best in their role have had experience at being the best at some level of competition, right? And Chris Murray is showing you at Iowa that he can do everything on the basketball court at a really high level.
And they're not forcing him to either. They're not holding a gun to his head and be like, "You're our number one guy," even though his usage percentage might tell you that. It's, if you watch Iowa, they're a competent fluid basketball team as a team, and he's the leader of that.
And to be completely transparent on this guy, he's had some bad performances this year as well. I think TCU was a bad game for him, but if you look at everybody, I mean, everybody on my board has had a bad performance that you can go and point to and be like, yeah, this guy had a bad outing. But Chris Murray is a junior, an old junior, right? That's going to knock him down. Not for me. I'm not a big ageist guy, but I think in the lottery, Chris Murray could definitely be a guy who contributes in the NBA at a high end level. And you're talking about a really good 3-and-D prospect.
I think it's really interesting because me and Caleb, when we were doing our board and writing,
the same
yeah,
I was about to say the same thing. Go ahead. Did you want me to tell it, or you can tell it?
I got you.
I felt better, but it's okay.
So when we're doing our board, two of the categories that we have are NBA skill and swing skill. Okay. And for Chris Murray, our swing skill was be your brother, and it's the funniest part is because the way that he shoots, the way that he moves, it's kind of uncanny how similar he is. I hate comping players to siblings. I hate it. It feels lazy.
It sure doesn't work with Isaiah and Evelyn. So yeah, good job on the Murray comparison there, because I agree with you. I saw it on the thing and I giggled when you said it. So
yeah, but this is one of those rare situations where he looks so similar to his brother, and like you said, his brother was a top 5 pick and can do a lot of different things on the basketball court. I don't see anything that should suggest that Chris Murray isn't capable of doing the exact same things that Keegan does.
Then that should, in my opinion, like in draft and scouting, is all nuanced. It's all philosophy based. If that's your evaluation on him, to me, that's at least a top 20 player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you subscribe to John Hollinger,
almost Keegan.
If you subscribe to John Hollinger's line of thinking, and it's pretty close, like there are only like 20 dudes every draft that are like, they're like hands down NBA dudes. And then you got to look at upside and all this other stuff. Like if you got a guy like Chris Murray, to me, he at least has to be a top 20 dude.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I snuck in there so rudely. I tried to interrupt, but we said for his archetype, we also have archetype column. We said almost Keegan, so he's definitely almost there, and I think that a 20 range right now is pretty fair. I do want to see, just can he keep shooting like he does? I mean, the shooting last year with him was something that I go to Wisconsin Madison, so I mean I'm very familiar with the whole. Keegan, Chris thing, and then also there's Johnny and, Johnny's brother, Jordan. I've been very tapped into kind of, that whole scenario. It's like one of the more perplexing things to have like 2 schools in the Big Ten with 2 twin brothers that, one was a top 10 pick the year before, and now the other one is getting kind of their chance. Where Jordan's, not great, but he is having a good night so far tonight. I wanted to check it, and because I knew that he was playing right now, so I figured that this would be a good little conversation. But the thing that I just want to keep monitoring is the shooting. I think that he's not as great of an. I don't think Keegan was a great athlete by any means, but he was definitely an NBA level athlete. I don't think Chris is quite that level of athlete. I think he's just a little bit more stiff. But the one thing that I think is really encouraging, though, is he's probably a better rebounder than his brother, and his brother was a really, really good rebounder. So, I'll segue into my guy.
I just want to say thank you, though, first of all, to the 3 of you. I just want to say thank you for making my underrated guy not underrated. So thanks, appreciate that.
Anytime.
No, I mean you're both. You are killing it right now, Trevor. For a underrated guy who doesn't focus on who hasn't really been focusing on the draft this year. You're
until January
with your pick so far. I'm gonna go with Amari Moore for San Jose State. He is a guy that I started kind of taking a peek at last year. If you don't know, he's 6'6", got probably a plus wingspan. I think it's probably around 6'8", 6'9". Really good feel for the game. Last year he was in the top 10 in the country in points per possession for pick and rolls, and he's right back up there in contention for that this year. Really efficient player, doesn't turn the ball over. And one wrinkle they add to his game this year is he can shoot it from deep now. I want to pull up the exact numbers because it's, he's made it a drastic improvement in that area. But the plus size guard thing, I think that I like my guards to be 6'4" to 6'6". And I think when they're a really, really good athlete, it makes it easy to kind of justify. And then you add on, the intangible stuff where he's a good decision maker. His jump shot has improved. There's just little boxes that I'm kind of checking in my head. And I think that he's a guy that, if we're really talking about sleepers, I think he's a guy that could creep his way to be one of the last picks in the draft. I think that this is a guy that we're going to hear about around combine time because, he has the measurables, he has the physical tools. He's a young junior. I don't know if he's 21 yet. But if he is 21, he just turned.
I think he's
at the beginning of the.
I think he's 22.
Really?
Based off the information
I read at the beginning of the year that he was 20.
I could be wrong.
I read at the beginning of the year that he was a young junior. So if I am mistaken, I don't think like I said, I'm not an ageist thing. I just thought it was notable. But a guy that I'm super impressed by, especially in the pick and roll stuff. I think he's making San Jose State a factor. They've had a good start to the season. He had a great performance against your Arkansas. He had a good performance at the Hogs. I think he had 20 plus in that game. Just a good 22. Athlete. I think.
Yep, I'm looking at it too. NBA Draft.net has him listed.
Yep, September 18th.
Damn, bro. The team profile lied to me at the beginning of the year. Maybe I was looking at
those team profiles are inconsistent.
The team
yeah, they're really bad. Yeah. I learned my lesson doing a North Carolina basketball deep dive. There were some teams that hadn't updated theirs in 3 years. It's bad. The team profiles are tough. That's not your fault.
But I did want to make sure I stuck one guy that I thought is borderline draftable, who is definitely without a doubt a sleeper guy. Who does need some things to swing right for him to kind of turn into a prospect in this pod. I don't know if you obviously watched more when he took on Arkansas. Did you have any thoughts?
Looked good, man. Maybe write his name down. His name's been buzzing a lot too in my little sphere of influence as well. So I have him in a range right now that I can already tell you is too low. It's just right now I'm at the point of the draft process, kind of peel the onion, let you guys in behind the curtain a little bit. My philosophy is to cast out as wide as the net as I can, put down initial gut check feel, and then I'm just going to sift through it. And then as I see and watch and hear about other players, I might throw a couple names in here and there, but I'm in my sifting stage right now. And I haven't made it down through my initial draft evaluation of him yet, but very promising dude. I knew as soon as I watched him that I was going to have him as a top 175 guy. It's just where I put him. And I think too with his age, man, he's going to be a Portsmouth guy. He's going to test the waters and he's going to be a Portsmouth guy. And he can really, all it takes is one really strong outing in front of a bunch of scouts and evaluators, man, for your fortunes to change.
Yeah. I think, if I were to give you one thing that I would want you to look at when you dive in on him, I think a very, very underrated aspect of being a true pick and roll maestro is being able to look off guys, look off the help defense and create, just a second gap in time where you either can sneak a pass in or you can create an opportunity to score. And he does a lot of things, with his eyes. You can't really get that stuff on, watching film like that, though. You just gotta kind of watch his head movement and watch where the players are looking. And you kind of you notice after a bit that he's able to kind of fake passes and also lay the ball up in one motion because his arms are so long. So that was one little nuance thing that I think makes his evaluation a little bit more spicy.
I added that to my evaluation notes. As you did that, I have my board pulled up and I wrote that down. So when I watch them, I will definitely make a note of that.
Yeah.
The eye thing is super neat too, because I agree with. I'm glad you brought up the eye thing because I think eyes and hips are two things sometimes that can't be caught on a video. Sometimes the hips is people go, well, you can see the hip turn. I got to see Jalen Slauson 4 rows from the court the other day, and I was very impressed with there were some things there with
It was
with
very
the
hard to keep him
intangibles.
out of this conversation.
I know, and that's fine, and we don't have to, and we don't
to.
have to. But like, and I'm only bringing up the point about the fact that you mentioned in-person scouting. I don't get to do a lot of it, and I don't take the opportunity for granted. And Slauson was somebody that I was very intrigued by, and I knew you two were. We talked about him, so I was very excited to see it. And there are things like the eyes is a huge one, right? Especially if you're on court level, you can see how these guys are looking and how their heads turning. The things like that you're going to see a lot closer. But Slauson, there was things with like hips. This is not a Slauson point, but I think the hips is really important too. Like I noticed there's some things that he can do, and obviously we know what he can do intangibly on defense. He's insane. But there are things that I got to see where I was like, okay, I don't like some of this stuff on offense, but I do love some of the stuff that defensively that he was able to do. And I was able to see it a lot more in tune, I think is the way I would word it. I like
Slauson might be the biggest if he can shoot guy in this class. Like if he can shoot, like 100%. You're talking like
yes. Can we spark a convo about Slauson for a moment? Oh
no. I was just gonna say let's segue into the sickos by talking Slauson.
Hmm?
Yeah, I mean, I will try and fight for the claim that I am the biggest Jalen Slauson fan in the draft Twitter community, but I think it's going to be hard because a lot of people are really starting to like him. I mean, I was most intrigued when I first saw him based off just the defensive ability and the athleticism. I'll be really interested to see his measurables. He's another guy that I think has a pretty plus wingspan. And the vert's going to be interesting to see.
Yes, he does.
Because I think that
he does. I promise.
Both those measurables, his vert, his running vert, and the wingspan, I think will be enough to get him drafted. I think both those things, along with the film and the tape that people have seen. On the offensive side of the ball, the shooting thing couldn't be. I kind of cut out, but so I didn't get to hear the piece after. But I assume that you meant that he can move. He will be a guy that could move up the most if he shows the ability to shoot.
Yeah, you're talking upwards of 30, 40 spots on people's boards if he can shoot.
No doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, watching him play NC State, I was watching it while I was at work, and it was really disheartening. I mean, it stunk to see him shoot that bad. The one thing that the major difference, and I'll turn it to the floor and let everybody talk about him because I mean Julian's sick of hearing me run mouth about this guy. The one thing I will say that's different than the beginning of the year, and I could tell that he's getting more confident, and that 20-plus point game the other night helped him a lot. In another game, he would have stopped shooting. Like in that Penn State game, he took 2 threes in the first half, missed them both, stopped shooting entirely. And at the beginning of that NC State game, and I guarantee Rich, the coach for Furman, said to him, he was like, don't get discouraged. Play with the foot down on the gas. Like, we're not out of this. You got to keep going. Because in the Penn State game, he stopped shooting the ball entirely. Like, he is a great passer and a great facilitator. But when he is at his best is when he's aggressive going towards the basket and willing to take shots from the outside. It makes him less predictable. It's where he's able to, kind of, beat the closeout, blow by him. He, kind of showed signs in the first half after they started to get blown out that he was going to kind of, crawl back into his little hole and just turn it into a passer. And then I saw the kind of a switch kind of change after he started making some plays on the defensive end that kind of got him going and got his confidence going. I mean, you can look it up. I don't think he's probably shot that many threes in his entire college career. I mean, if he has, I don't think he shot that poorly or poor enough to keep shooting like that. So, just a little mentality thing that I think, talks about what type of player he is and how he's growing just throughout this season. He is a senior, but I mean, the guy is still getting better with each game.
So all of the stuff you said is completely valid because being really close to their bench, obviously I couldn't hear anything, but I can tell you that team was locked in for 40 minutes. There was no, and it's obviously not just him, we're talking about him in this case, but the team mentality is where that Furman team really succeeds. When they're playing together, they're an unbelievable squad. And I think people forget that he's the best player on their team intangibly for the NBA draft prospect-wise, but he's also, there are guys on that team that can ball. And I really enjoyed seeing, even though they, that was the most switchable defense they'll probably see all year, except for maybe Penn State, depending on how you value Penn State. But State can switch, and they don't have a guy that can guard him right now, especially with some injuries. And I just want to say for the fact that I mentioned the hip thing, I'm just up front, I'll move on quickly, but I was very thankful to say that I got to see him because later on in this process, when I'm fighting for him in that weird 30, 45, that jump, if that shooting happens, I can tell you the shots, the shot's not there. Like right now, I get it. Like I'm with y'all both. Like if he has that shot jump, that we're talking 30, 40, like you said. The one thing I'm really glad I got to see was just sometimes I mentioned how like certain things don't pop, right? You mentioned earlier the eye thing is really important, right? Sometimes athleticism doesn't pop either on video. Like sometimes you truly, when you see a guy in person, you go, holy crap, that guy can move or jump or this or that, right? I think the Benedict Mathurin fact last year, I think a lot of people got to see him up close and they were like, oh my God, what happened? I think Rucker was one of those people. But just being transparent, like there was a play in the middle of the second half when they started to kind of take their foot off the gas, where obviously the backboard itself, right? If I'm on the other side and they're scoring on this side, and they throw that oop to him. Everybody probably saw it if you're watching the game. And his hands and his entire body, he took the oop outside of the square. Like I'm talking like hands, arms, legs, whole body, head, doesn't matter. Nothing was inside of the square when he grabbed the ball. And of course he made the dunk. So athletically, just seeing some of that stuff and understanding that like he is that type of potential, I would love to see what he can do. Even not even just a jump shot, but just as a facilitator, just let him do a little bit more. That team plays so hard together as a team, and they run a really, really solid offense. I just think he needs to be unlocked, quote unquote, in that potential. I'm done on Slauson. That's it.
Before we move on, my favorite Jalen Slauson bit is just we don't talk about basketball IQ a lot, but his basketball IQ is off the charts. Like,
yeah,
he declines if there's a DHO where the look's not there, he declines it, moves the ball, and makes a swing. I've seen him do a lot of times do that. He does that Draymond Green thing where Draymond fakes the DHO, no one goes with him, and he drives to the hoop. It's the little things like that are what really have impressed me with Jalen Slauson. And I believe that because of his mentality, I think the jump shot's going to be there eventually. Sometimes I like to just look at the guy as a person and not as like what their tools are as a prospect. And just there's some guys that are just winners and some guys that you can just tell with the intangibles that they are going to be an NBA player. And I genuinely believe that. I know Caleb talks my ear off about him, but I'm happy to hear it because I'm there for the guy. I really like him.
Yeah, he'll be all right.
Anything unsaid about Slauson before we need to rapid fire these
I think we all said enough.
Guys.
If Stephen wants to say anything,
all right.
free.
I like him.
Good. That's good. It's December. Leave it at that.
He's a good prospect.
Rapid fire these a little bit here. What's your underrated or your sicko or whatever word we want to use? Who's somebody that people that have probably never heard of or should have heard of, or wherever you want to go with this, and we can get rolling here.
I got two, and I'll throw them out right now. And again, like calling a player a sleeper now is almost laughable because like everybody knows everybody. Like this is the earliest I've ever seen like the draft community as a whole.
Yep.
Know hundreds and hundreds of players. It's crazy like how much we're all sharpening each other, which is great too because it makes us all better. Yep. I mean, Caleb right now is scrolling through his entire board. I have mine called up over here to my right on my secondary screen, and yeah, the number of names is endless, but I have two. I'm probably going to butcher one. This is like how much of a sleeper he, like I've watched him countless times, but Tafale Leonard Jr., did I say that right?
I was about to say him. Oh my gosh.
Tafale
you
Leonard
read
Jr.
my mind, Steven. Oh,
yep.
Just look at his name.
Sleeper prospect is I think that a lot of people are buzzing on him right now. And they're going to continue to. A buddy of mine at No Ceilings, Tyler Metcalf, said, I just ran a Bartorvik query on blocking, stealing, and I forget the other metric, but there were only 3 names that made that list. 2 of them are big men, and then there's also Tafale Leonard. Like the fact that this dude as a perimeter player is a weak side rim protector, is someone who can shoot the passing lanes and finish in transition, someone with an incredible handle. I think that as like a position definition, I have him listed as a perimeter player, someone who I believe can give you minutes at the 1, 2, or the 3.
I have him as guard as well.
Yep. So I think that he can do a little bit of all of that, and that position versatility makes him extremely valuable. Still a younger dude. I believe he's only 20 as a sophomore right now, so that's pretty good. And he plays at mid-10. So if he doesn't like his draft stock, I think that enough people could convince him to go back maybe to a high major and prove it against some higher level of competition. But right now he's looked good. And then another one would be Walter Clayton Jr. I know that I'm kind of late to the party on this guy too, but Prospect out of Iona. He's a guard. He's about 6'2", 195. Just can do so much offensively. Like start and stop speed is incredible. Has tremendous body control. Right now, the finishing numbers I don't think are where you would want them to be. But if you look at him athletically, I think that they can get there. And then just a tremendous threat from outside the arc, and is a pretty sound guard defender as well. Like he's not going to be Tafali Leonard where he's coming off the weak side and blocking shots off the backboard or anything like that, but he's a very capable guy. And I think that he's going to be a name that rises throughout the rest of the year. So I got Walter Clayton Jr. and Tafali Leonard Jr.
All right, Julian.
Mine is not necessarily that much of a sicko. He's just a guy that I really like. I'm talking about Norchad Omier, one of my favorite small ball 5 prospects.
Tyler Rucker would kiss you if he heard you say this. So.
He's just such a powerful player, man. Like physically imposing, really nimble for like his size. He looks like he would be kind of a clunky and a bit of mobile. But I mean, look, we know the jump shot's not totally there yet, but I have confidence in him as, one of these, Draymond Green, Bam Adebayo type, not that level of player. Please don't misinterpret that. But that's
their role. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That sort of a role as a guy who's a bit undersized for a big, but has the athleticism and the physical tools to play in that DHO role.
Caleb, I know you agreed with Stevens. Do you have any more before I give mine and we can get out of here?
I mean, I was looking at the Tafali Leonard and I was like, honestly, even now, I don't think he's that much of a sleeper prospect. Kind of like wait, you took the words right out of my mouth, Steven. I'll go with one. Since Steven isn't an ageist, I don't think he'll get on my back for this one too much. But I'll go with Eric Williams Jr. out of San Diego.
Okay.
A 6'7" guard. He is 24. A bit older, but kind of does everything. I mean, he can put the ball on the floor. He can be a lead guard at times, passes the ball. Like, he's a really impressive passer for somebody who's not really considered, to be like initiator. But the biggest thing with him is when he is on shooting the ball. Yeah, like he's one of those guys, he had a 40-point game earlier this year, and I think he shot like 65% from 3 in it. And took like 13 threes and was like a 10 of 13 or something crazy. It was some crazy numbers, and most of his scoring was outside. Good defense, can rebound for a guard. Obviously, he's got plus size at 6'7". So, that's probably one guy that I think will definitely get slept on because of the age thing, and then also just, going to San Diego, don't get as many eyes. But a sicko cut for sure.
Did one of us take San Diego losses in our skins draft that we did, guys? The three of us. I don't think anybody did. Somebody took Pacific, I think. But anyway, they're doing better. They're doing better. Well, not Pacific, but San Diego's doing a lot better than anticipated, probably. So lucky for you, since Steven's not an ageist. My guy is also 24. I like, especially when we do these sickos, I like going really old guys that have had 5 years of college basketball experience, which I think is very valuable sometimes.
And grandchildren, yeah.
I don't know how that broke me. So this guy has had quite the interesting path, and I'll be short and sweet, hopefully. But I was actually going to do this guy's teammate, Bobby Klintman, who you did a really, really awesome article on. So first of all, shout out to you for that. It was an unbelievable read. I love how Substack tells you the read time, too. It's like, 15? Is it 15 minutes? I was like, we'll see. I enjoyed
like when
it
GPS
thoroughly.
tells you how long your trip is going to be. It's like, I got to beat it.
Yeah, it was great. I enjoyed it. I think I recommend that at NoCeilingsNBA.com. Please go check that out, everybody. That Bobby Klintman article was great. His teammate did go down yesterday. They play Rutgers and Duke this coming week. And unfortunately, Tyree Appleby, however you want to say his name, because at this point I've heard announcers do 2 different ways. Obviously, the Deeks lost Laravia and Alondes Williams last year, so it was kind of this weird void on this roster. Cleveland State, Florida, and now Wake Forest for his 5th and final year of eligibility. If he doesn't take that weird COVID year, I don't know how they end up doing that. But college, he's consistently averaged 12 points, 4 assists, and he's been one of those guys where he doesn't have to have the ball, but when he does, it opens my eyes, right? I'm very thankful to say I get to watch this guy down the road here, so it's nice to see him. Obviously, I didn't see him much at Florida, but This year he's averaging 18.5, 3.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists on really awesome splits, which I thought was really impressive for how much more he's getting the ball. 51, 41, 87 splits. I mean, he's shooting unbelievably, and obviously almost 50, 40, 90 type of club, which is really impressive, and obviously in a relatively bad situation. I say relatively bad. They played a lot better than maybe expected, but that's part of the point to Klintman's case. But best year of his college career, obviously small frame. We talked about earlier, 6'1", 174 is not anything to write home to mom and dad about. But, hard to break into a guard role, but I don't see why someone can't give him a two-way contract one day if he fights his way through the process.
Yeah, I've seen a number of people shout him out too. And I've seen the side-by-side comparison between Alondes and Appleby and their stats, and it's like Alondes was Player of the Year in the ACC.
Yeah,
why can't Appleby
we saw that
this
yep.
year? And I was just like, that's a really fair point, man. And the ACC is it's weird because it almost felt like there was a lull, but now the ACC is like starting to come on now as a one of the tougher conferences in all of college basketball again.
Don't worry, Julian. I bit our tongue on that. In our overreaction college basketball pie we did on my feed, my overreaction was the ACC is being treated like a mid-major this year, and it deserves it. So, walk that one back a little. I'll just be honest. But anyway, I think Wake Forest has been a lot of fun. So they let him have control of the offense, and it's been awesome. So that was all I had.
I got one more if we're up for it. Demoy Hodge for Missouri.
I was thinking about mentioning
Stillmaster, yeah.
You got the Missouri Valley Conference Defensive Player of the Year last year. If I'm not mistaken, I know he was some Conference Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. Came from Cleveland State. That's the school for sure. Over to Missouri. Definitely a guy that I thought was going to be a defensive-only player, just based off of, the numbers. He didn't shoot the ball particularly well. But, I mean, little did I know he was due for a huge kind of jump up in that area. If I'm not mistaken, he should be still shooting around the mid 40% or around 40% from three. I haven't really checked in on him in a bit, but he started the year really well. And he's just another one of those guys that when you watch him move around, you're like, yeah, this guy probably could play at the next level. He's getting the ball more than he did at Cleveland State, which is good. I mean, especially when you're moving up in programs and they're giving you the ball more, it generally indicates that they trust him and he's a pretty good player. Yeah, shooting 41% from three still, 50, 41, 71. Kind of does a little bit of everything, 17, 4, 2.5, and 3 steals almost. So, still showing up on the defensive side of the ball. Decent size at 6'4". I think he could be I think he's one of those guys that could play the two, but I think would fit primarily better playing the three, kind of like a Lou Dort type of role. I think that when you're looking around the league, you need versatile wings, and I think when teams go small, this is a guy that can get rolled out there. Again, on the older side, but we're not ageist here, so that's my Demoy Hodge pitch right there.
All right.
Yeah.
Do we want to wrap her up?
Skills master.
I mean, yeah.
We've been going for a while now. Steven, you got anything you want to plug before we let you go?
Parting words.
Any written work coming up at all?
Yeah, so I have NoCeilingsNBA.com. That's like the central hub where you can go and find.
We'll put in the captions.
That's where anyone can go and find any of that, right? But I have my Weekend Warrior. I'm the Sunday contributor, when I'm in town. And I have a column that recurs every Sunday. And I have a feature prospect that I'm going to be writing on, kind of going back to my roots, a little bit of a homer bias. It's going to be featuring Ricky Council. I have a pretty cool prelude in there where I talk about like how every team needs an OG, not like Anunoby, but like essentially a vet on their team, right? And that even includes the college ranks. I have a section in there that's going to be a little bit behind the curtain where I'm not going to share my top 100 per se, but I'm going to share some pretty interesting anecdotes about, the number of this position player that I have in my top 100, the tiers.
I did something similar to that. That's cool. That's really sweet.
And then, of course, a recurring thing that I have is the Weekend Warrior Awards, where for a lot of the major conferences, I go through and I award, what prospect I think has a real or even an outside shot to be drafted, and who performed best out of that week. I'm actually going to be recording tomorrow for Tuesday's home and away episode. I got Josh Lloyd from the Locked On Podcast Network. It's going to be coming on, and we're going to be talking about young NBA players. So anyone who wants to listen to that or any of the other excellent shows that we have on No Ceilings, anywhere you get your podcast, No Ceilings NBA, subscribe to that. We got great content that comes out there 5 days a week, written work 6 days a week when I'm in town, guaranteed 5 days a week, even when I'm gone. So, and thank you guys so much for having me on. Julian and Caleb, I've chatted with you guys plenty. It's nice to actually, get to put eyes to face and, get to interact with you guys. And Trevor, it was a pleasure as it was last time, man. I'm very pleased and happy to work with all three of you guys. And if you ever need anybody else on the show, man, just say when, and I'll do everything I can to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on.
We appreciate your time, Stephen.
Yeah, this was awesome.
And I'd hate myself if I let this go. As a military kid myself, I just want to thank you for your service and shout you out. So,
well, that means a lot, man. It's it's something I've done for a long time, so it just feels like a normal job. But whenever I hear it from other people outside, that either have influence or none at all, and they kind of talk with me about what it is, and it's really humbling whenever I get people who thank me like you do, or that say like how crazy my job is, because I'm just so used to it. It's just like going to work in an office and type on a computer. It's just what I do every day. So I really appreciate that, Caleb. It means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't let that one slip. I couldn't let this go on without slipping that in there. So I think that this was probably one of the best podcasts we've done on the channel. Very informative. So thanks again, Stephen, and we're off the clock.